Hello, everyone. My name's John Rakich, and welcome to the 7th Annual Location Managers Guild International Hollywood Location Scouts panel at Comic-Con International in San Diego. So we are the people who work with the director and the production designer to figure out how the story can be created here in the real world. Before we get too far, though, let's start things off with a quick little sizzle reel that showcases the work of our panel with transitions between our original location scouting photos and final scenes in the movies and shows that we've worked on.
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. I walked out this morning and I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. Won't you look down upon me, Jesus? You gotta help me make a stand. You just got to see me through another day. My body's aching and my time is at hand. I won't make it any other way. Whoa, I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. Been walking my mind to an easy time, my back turned towards the sun. Lord knows when the cold wind blows, it'll turn your head around. Well, there's hours of time on the telephone line to talk about things to come. Sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground. Whoa, I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you, baby, one more time again now. Thought I'd see you one more time again. There's just a few things coming my way this time around now. Thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you right away now.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Wasn't the word I was thinking of, but yes, they are. Gorgeous beasts.
So thank you very much to our fabulous editor, Jacob, for putting this all together. And I'd also like to take this time to acknowledge the companies that sponsor our guild's participation at Comic-Con. All of them are vendors that we location managers use every week during a film shoot, thus giving you a glimpse into some of the things that we handle. Big Bear Lake Film Office assists filmmakers with permitting and location needs while filming in Big Bear Lake. The Directors Guild of Canada Ontario District Council is a labor organization for over 2,200 location managers, production designers, and directors. Inland Empire Film Services assists with the city, county, and federal film permits in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. Ontario International Airport is not in Canada, like I always say it is, but 35 miles from downtown LA. They've been featured in movies like Argo, Mission Impossible 3, and Catch Me If You Can. Pacific Production Services takes care of filming permits, city services, road closures, and on-set police officers. Park is Directed is a cartography company that makes maps with crew parking directions and film set layouts. Riverside County Film Commission helps with finding locations, and they manage filming at county-owned properties. The Temecula Film Office assists film productions with permits and locations in and around the city of Temecula. Simmons Ambulance provides safety services for TV and film productions while shooting on location in the US and Mexico. And finally, White's Location Equipment Supply is a Toronto-based national rental company of tents, porta potties, safety gear, and more. So our past LMGI panels have featured location managers from outside of Los Angeles. And this time, again, we have international representation from Ireland, from Canada, and as various parts of the United States. So we're going to do a quick, go down the line quickly with some introductions of who we are each and how we got into this. Myself, I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I've been in locations for about 20 years, mostly working out of Toronto. I started off as an office assistant, kind of worked my way and fell into locations as a scout, an assistant, and now a manager. And I've worked mostly on TV shows, but the odd feature film. Things I've worked on in my past is the Resident Evil franchises, Pixels, the series Hemlock Grove, American Gods, and the TV show Shadowhunters.
I'm Kat Kagan. I'm from London. I live in Los Angeles. I moved to the United States about 30 years ago. I got into this by mistake. Literally, someone called me, like, you want to work on a film? I was like, oh, yeah. And here I am. I've worked, 20 years later. I didn't expect it to turn into this, but it did. I've worked on a lot of mostly feature films. I haven't done really any television. A couple of Fast and Furiouses. I've done 3 Marvel films. We did a Civil War together. I work wherever I get sent, whatever I'm looking for. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Dustin Pitan. I originally from Minnesota. I went down to Florida to go to film school. After film school, I moved up to Atlanta just on the spur. I heard it was kind of booming at the time. And I got a job in the location department. And they kind of just kept hiring me for some reason or other. So now I've do a lot of scouting. I do a lot of assistant managing. Worked on a lot of Marvel movies, a lot of some TV. We just worked on the new Jumanji together, things like that. And it's been a lot of fun. I've been doing it for about 10 years now, so I enjoy it.
Hey, I'm Josh Dillard. I'm from a small town outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I guess after high school, I kind of didn't know exactly what career path I wanted to take. And there was a
Let
point...
us know when you figure it out, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a friend that offered me a production assistant job for a live television network, which is totally different than what we do. So I did that for a year or two, and then just started applying to get a PA job on feature films, which was really tough. I probably spent a year sending out emails, making phone calls, didn't hear anything back, but I stuck with it, finally got a PA job and kind of took it and ran with it. And in 2014, this guy here hired me for the first Ant-Man movie, and I've consistently worked with Marvel ever since then. Worked my way up to key assistant location manager, which is what I am now. And that's my story.
I'm Mike Fantasia. I used to have a real job, and I used to work for the Forest Service in Montana. And one summer, this guy named Spielberg showed up to make a movie, and I got my shot of movie heroin, figuratively, not literally. And I quit my government job. My mother cried for 2 weeks. I quit my government job with pension and 2 weeks vacation. What am I, crazy? And I've never looked back. I've been very, very lucky. I've worked with some fantastic people. See, one guy that I worked with a couple of years ago, Joey, and it's been a great ride. I've worked with some fantastic producers, directors, designers, but most of all, I've had some really great location teams that have done all the work while I get all the glory.
Hi, I'm Robbie. I'm from Belfast. Originally, I was from South Africa. I started to manage around 2004, 2005, and my role initially was much more scouting. Started working with a producer called Mark Huffam, who gave me a script called Game of Thrones in 2008. And apart from a few feature films that I managed before that and scouted for, that was my full-time decade with HBO. I'm also very, very lucky to be in this job. It's a unique blend of amazing creativity and hard work, but I feel totally, totally lucky to be where I am today. It's just been great.
So I'm going to ask a few questions of our panelists, and then after we'll open up the floor to questions from you if you have any. So Dustin, please give everybody a summary of what it is that we do exactly. What is the location scouting process, and what do we do during each of the stages of prep, filming, and wrap?
Oh boy. So what we do, basically, is we come onto the project. We are either given a script to read or notes from the production designer, usually both. We have to decide, and everyone on the production decides what's filmed on stage versus what's filmed on location. If it's filmed on stage, we don't necessarily worry about it too much. If it's filmed on location, we have to we as scouts go out and send other scouts, and we find whatever they're looking for. If they're looking for an old school, we got to find a whole bunch of options for old schools. We then present that to the production designers, the directors, the producers, all that fun stuff until one is picked. Once one is actually picked, we then kind of transition from a creative aspect of finding these cool spaces to more of a facilitating aspect of an event planner almost aspect of it. We set up permits, we negotiate prices with everyone, we figure out where crew is going to eat that day, we make sure that they have enough restrooms, we got to make sure they have AC. All that stuff. We have to do all sorts of prep in order to make it happen. Once we get on location, we're just kind of there to make sure no fires start, literally and figuratively. So we're at the time of filming, we're kind of the middlemen between the production and the public. And then hopefully everything works out great and everything is fine and we get in, we get out, everybody leaves to the next location or stage work, and then we're just kind of left with the bones, and we got to replace it all. We have art come in, repatch everything if we have any damage or anything like that. So we make sure all the public and our property managers are fine with us, and we move on. And that's kind of the long and short of it, I guess.
All right, Robbie, so while working on Ireland on the last 8 seasons of that tiny little show, Game of Thrones, you had to not just scout for some iconic locations for the various regions of Westeros, but for some of the largest sequences ever filmed on television. Please tell us about some of them and how you pull off these kinds of logistical challenges, or how most of us do.
Sure. If I could start with the first bit. So the iconic bit, really, when you start a TV series, there's so much collaboration with your production designer. You have a creative input, but at the same time, you'll be given consistent notes as you go along, and you do a lot of driving around and a lot of showing of pictures, and you're establishing the template of what you think the show is going to look like. And once we found out we were going to go for a very long time, it was all about continuity and journeys and the regions of Westeros making sense. So in a way, you're establishing the ground rules of where things live. So anything to do with, for example, the riverlands had to have water involved. Anything to do with Winterfell had to be coniferous trees, not deciduous trees if possible. I got given a kind of a color template. So from Gemma Jackson said to me, anything to do with King's Landing or a warm territory has to be red or orange. Anything to do with the Eyrie is blue or slate gray. Anything to do with Winterfell is rubble work, but quite sophisticated and defensive, whereas Castle Black is a properly defensive fortress. And those rules got set up as we were going along through the series. And it was kind of up to me to remember that as I had my scouting template taking shape. So, yeah, I mean, pretty much Northern Ireland hosted a huge proportion of the series. We had 63 locations over the 8 years. And some of those locations would have been an entire postcode where there might have been 20 separate shoots locations within that particular estate, for example. So you'd be looking for things like Dragonstone, you'd be looking for things like Winterfell, Riverlands, Pike Harbour, all very exciting because once you had the template in your mind as to what the production designer wants and what you think might be super cool, you really are the first person in a way painting the picture, which is why I love this job so much, because we are the first lens that photographs the location very often, and it's that initial creative input which really is the genesis. So yeah, I had the honor of finding pretty much a whole batch of the iconic stuff. Dragonstone, which you saw there on the screen, was literally every beach in Ireland and every cliff around the entire coastline, which took me 9 days the first time. And it was like A to B, B to C, C to D from a research, and then ending in a nice hotel, preferably with white wine at the end of it, and oysters. And I did the whole country. And the producers at that point had a lot of faith in me. You know, you kind of work up a real collaborative relationship where people start to trust your aesthetic take on things, which is a good place to be in. To go on the more logistical side, that's the flip side of Game of Thrones is it has to be beautiful, but it also has to be practical. And my first production designers before Game of Thrones used to say to me, I don't give a damn where the trucks park, show me the beautiful pictures. Very rapidly within Game of Thrones, it was about where the trucks parked, where the cranes parked, where the green screens got built. Things like, if you're doing a battle scene, the practicality of 100 horses running on terrain, you have to choose a location that immediately works for horses. So you're crossing off whole chunks of Northern Ireland and Ireland, because there's a lot of marshland and bogland. Once you then decide, okay, this is what's left, then you start to think, okay, what still fulfills the brief of the creative script requirements? So it's like a building block, and you eliminate things which they don't work, and you have the practicality of how much equipment, how many people, and how many horses. And that's what, for example, the Battle of the Bastards that you saw Bob in season 6 was about. That was kilometers of trackway in a field that I remembered from the owners of the estate had been a racetrack. So I ticked the horses problem immediately. And then it also had this kind of bowl effect, an arena around the production, which at that point we had so many paparazzi chasing us that we needed privacy. So those concerns kind of came to the forefront. It's also really important in a location team that you have a strong logistical component and the ability to delegate, especially in series TV, because you're often jumping onto the next creative team with the next director and the next DOP and the next first AD. So you want to make sure that what's happening behind you is not going on fire. So there's a delegation element too. It's just moving people around at that point. It's a circus. Like you're saying there, it's really about event management, keeping people safe and making sure that, you know, it still looks beautiful at the end of the day.
Great. So, Josh, you've worked on some high-profile comic book movies, like Avengers Infinity War, Endgame, and Spider-Man Homecoming. What are some of the additional challenges on movies that are so big and popular?
I mean, it's probably the obvious things, just the scope of everything that we do is bigger on those movies. You know, on Infinity War, we had a location in downtown Atlanta where we basically shut down 3 blocks just in the heart of downtown for, 3 weeks at a time. I think total we were down there for over a month and a half, but the road was open for a portion of that time. But once we shut it down, there businesses, residents. A big part of our job is to go in and speak with all of those people and try to get them on board, to let us come in and basically, take over their block or blocks in this case. And not only that, we dressed out each side of the street with facades. We turned downtown Atlanta into Greenwich Village. We threw cars through the air. We had burning cars, crashed cars. So when you're working on these comic book movies, that's kind of the stuff you're dealing with when you're out on location. A lot of explosions, special effects, stunts. There are more lighting positions. We have to negotiate the deals to place those lights, on rooftops or parking lots, wherever that may be. And then I guess, that's more of the logistical portion of it. As far as the high-profile comic book movies, it's, if you've got Iron Man and Doctor Strange in full costume in the middle of downtown Atlanta, that's obviously going to attract a crowd. But generally, in all of my experiences, it's just people that are excited. They're not there to cause any problem. They'll just stand there on the corner and watch what's going on. So, that's always really exciting to see kids and their families come out and see the superheroes in real life. But, generally, it's just the scope, the footprint. We have, some days we may have had 10 or 12 principal cast members. So that's 10 or 12 additional trailers in our base camp, which requires a bigger parking lot. And that's basically what it is.
So, Mike, you've also done your fair share of large-scale feature film projects. You just spent a bit of time on your latest project working with the United States military. Tell us a bit about the Department of Defense approvals, how the process works for using their equipment and their property. And you could probably tell everyone what you just finished, too.
It's this little movie, a sequel to Top Gun. If any want to see the trailer, I have it right here on my screen. I've got to say, I've been doing this for 29 years, 30 years. It's been the best 15 years of my life. Hasn't been easy, and part of that has to do with the Navy. And I'm not saying that in a negative way at all. Working with the Department of Defense, any military branch, you need to get approval from Washington, D.C. And the Department of Defense will cooperate with a filmmaker if their film casts them in a positive light. Obviously, Top Gun casts the Navy in a positive light. After the first Top Gun, the Navy recruitment for pilots went up like 4,000%. Huge, huge, huge. And that's one of the reasons they were so interested in doing this. They need pilots. A lot of their pilots are older, they're retiring, they go off to work for airlines, make a lot of money. So the Navy needs pilots. Anyway, so we, not me, Jerry Bruckheimer and his team for years have been working with the Department of Defense to come up with a script that they would approve. Once they approved it, the process is fairly straightforward. If our filmmaking activities, what we need for a particular scene, ties in with Navy, in this case, Navy training, they'll give you the plane, they'll give you the ship, they'll give you the personnel for free. If it's outside of their training, we have to pay for it. So a percentage, I can't tell you what the percentage was, but a hefty percentage of our work on the film tied in with the Navy's training needs. The pilots have to take off and land so many times in a month. They've got to land on carriers so many times in a month. They've got to take off from carriers so many times in a month. They've got to do a certain number of low levels in a month, certain level of high levels in a month. So we had one AD, that's all his job was to coordinate with the Navy on assets. So we broke down the script. For this scene, we need 2 F-18 Echoes, we need 4 F-18 Foxtrots, we need 27 ground personnel, 17 pilots. He had a huge breakdown. We constantly were changing that as our script changed. And we worked with the Navy as much as possible to work our activities into their training. there was a lot of our work that just, there's no way it would fit into their training because they don't fly the way we wanted to fly in our movie. As one pilot said to me, we don't fly at 100 feet. We fly at 25,000 feet and drop bombs on people's heads from there. We don't go in at 100 feet and drop bombs. So there were, I would say, hundreds of hours of aerial work that was done outside of training that Paramount paid for. One of the problems with working with the military is their job is not really filmmaking. Their job is to defend the country. We had a couple of occasions when we tried to keep pilots, use pilots as often as we could in continuity during a sequence, because the sequences were all broken down. If the plane was going to do this and this and this, it was like 5 different steps, and we'd break it down into stages, and they'd go out and do stage 1 a bunch of times, then stage 2, then stage 3, then 4. And so if you're doing this over the course of many days, it benefits everybody to have the same pilots. Problem is, sometimes they get called away. A lot of our pilots were SMEs, subject matter experts in something or other. One guy that was our principal pilot is the best Top Gun instructor in the country. So we lost Tambo a lot because he'd go off somewhere. We never knew where he went, but he'd be gone for a couple of weeks. Then he'd come back with a big smile on his face. He'd just done something really cool. So we had to work within the constraints of the Navy as far as their needs. We were here in San Diego some months back, and we were going to get on an aircraft carrier and take off and go out to sea for 4 days. When we showed up, we got on the carrier, and then one of the screws didn't work. So they had to fix one of the screws. Screws are like the size of this room, huge propellers. It takes a lot to change it. They had to fly them in from up north, and it took a week. So we scrambled. We couldn't leave the carrier. We couldn't film on the carrier out at sea, so we changed all of our work, and within about 6 hours, we came up with all different sequences of work that we did on the carrier while it was at dock. And when you see the movie, you'll think it's out at sea, because we only showed the water a couple of times. We never saw the San Diego skyline. You never saw the airfield adjacent. You just looked down at the water. So the biggest challenge is just coordinating with the department that you're working with on what you want to do and what they need to do. So a lot of times, there were many times when we'd find out in the morning, we're not going to shoot those sequences. We have to figure out something else to shoot. But overall, working with the Navy was very interesting. It was every movie you learn something. Every project, you think, I've done this for 25, 30 years. I know everything. You don't know crap. You always learn something new, and how to work with those kinds of logistics was probably the biggest learning experience for me on this movie. It was great. It was fantastic, and watch the trailer. It'll really knock your socks off. Oh, and when you watch the trailer, there's only one scene that has visual effects. Everything you see in the trailer is real, from the dust to the vapes off the planes. It looks like it's fake, but none of it's fake. It's all real. The only thing that's VFX is the very, very last shot of the trailer. So anyway, so that's how it is to work with the Navy.
So, Kat, on Triple Frontier and Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, you had to work in some pretty unique environments. What are the risks and the challenges of the different natural places you've scouted and worked out of? And what do you need to do to make sure the crew is safe when they arrive later?
It really depends on what it is that you're looking for. If you're dealing with a lot of natural environments like beaches or jungles, or when we shot Jurassic in Hawaii, or Triple Frontier we shot in Hawaii and in Northern California, you're dealing with these environmental agencies, harbors and beaches and forestries, and they're, well, Mike can attest, I mean, they're government workers, and as much as we love them and they do great jobs for us, it's very difficult for them to get on board with us as a creative, bunch of people who constantly change their minds. And you get these directors who are standing in this amazing landscape, and they have no idea what they want to do. So you kind of have to prepare for everything. And you know that if you want to go to a place that is particularly beautiful and you want to build a set, you have to go to a place that's going to allow you to dig and move soil and move shrubbery, because there are a lot of rules and regulations about protecting our beautiful environments. If you're doing something that's action-related, then it's a little bit different, because you're looking at a really fast-moving car or a big fight sequence, and that is about control and safety. So when we've done Civil War, was it Civil War? And then what I did before was Winter Soldier. We had some huge crash sequences and fight sequences that we did in Cleveland. And we really needed control of these major streets. And, they're like big commercial streets that look beautiful, that was supposed to be New York or Washington. I can't remember. I think it was Washington. And you want a big span. It looks big. It looks like an important place in the world that, this big sequence is happening. So you have to think about all the entities that you have to get on board and be able to make it safe and be able to literally physically do all this stuff, because a lot of it is not visual effects. That happens on the soundstage. The stuff that we do is the real stuff you see. Like Mike said, his stuff is all real. When you see those things that we do in the Marvel movies, those fight sequences, those crash sequences, those outdoor sequences, they're real. We dress them. We do the stunt rehearsals. We do the pyrotechnics. We do all that stuff. And there is a huge litany of permissions that you have to get to do that with cities and peoples and EPAs and safety meetings and, structural assessments. And it just goes on and on. You have a crew of 500 people. And, of course, the actors, if you're doing anything that's dangerous or action-related close to them. Now, we do have a big second unit that doesn't involve the actors. It involves the doubles, because obviously you can't take the risk of your main actor, your main superhero, getting injured. So they all have these amazing stunt doubles that look just like them. And they're very interesting. Like the one for Scarlett Johansson has to wear like a little curvy suit because she's got a little vavoom, and her stunt double is like a pure athlete, because you see all those amazing fight sequences. This woman is this incredible athlete. She's just amazing. So she wears her curvy suit, so she looks like Scarlett Johansson, and does all that stuff when we do all these huge closures and car crashes. So it's a lot of, going to the right place, knowing that you can do what you need to do. You can see a place that's really beautiful, but you can't film there because for whatever reason, the state won't let you, the city won't let you. You have to know that you're going to be able to get the trucks close by. It's going to look great, and you're going to actually be able to close this place down, crash 50 cars, store 50 cars at the doubles, because you're going to do it maybe twice or 3 times. So there's a lot of different aspects that you have to think about. But the first thing, aside from the beauty of it, the next thing is, well, can we actually do this here? Which narrows down a lot of places. So you do it by a process of elimination. Well, that looks amazing. But I know, after I've done a little bit of research, we can't do what we need to do there. So we just go on to the next thing. So that's a lot of the work for us. But yeah.
So, Robbie, you're based in Ireland, and you generally work on projects within your geographic area, much as myself. For the audience out there who don't live in LA or New York, do you have any recommendations for starting their film careers closer to home?
Yeah, I'd say it's always a convenient thing if you can work close to home. I think if you're starting out and you're trying to establish yourself, it's best that you know the terrain that you're in. It's best you know the landscape. It's best that you know the people, the connections with the communities. That often is a key that I've found, really, is that really helps me. It's the relationships that you build up. It's people telling you where they think there's a giant, sexy tree. And if you can keep those friendships, and if you keep delivering what you say you're going to do within a community, they start to like you. You pay them good money to portray their lands and their estates beautifully on screen. So there is something to be said about building up a nice local database of all the places you know. I'm so lucky because I've had a decade to continually dig and dig and dig deeper and deeper into Northern Ireland, every time with a different brief. And it's so weird. The number of times I've found things that I should have found 3 years before and gone, there it is, you know. But that's the benefit of being based where you live. The flip side to that, I think, is that actually I'm from South Africa originally, and I actually think that having half touristy eyes when I was in Northern Ireland actually fueled my scouting and my enthusiasm, because I was seeing things in a really wondrous new way. It's like, wow, Giant's Causeway, wow, Ballantoy. And if you photograph things enthusiastically and beautifully and show them and portray them, then I think you're going to tick the creative boxes that the designer and the director and so on want to see. So the number of times I was told in Northern Ireland by the crew and by people who've lived there, like they could not believe the stuff I was finding within 15 minutes of their houses. I think part of that is just the enthusiasm of maybe being slightly new in a territory. Just to that same point, because I've been like kind of a prisoner of Game of Thrones for the last 10 years, I've only just been able to do a few of these lovely seminars, and I did my first FAM tour the other day in Northwestern Territories, northern Canada. And seeing that new terrain has inspired me beyond measure. I mean, I want to re-photograph Northern Ireland now, because it's so juicy to find something that really turns you on visually. It makes me want to go back to the Mourns, look at them again, the Mourne Mountains in the Kingdom of Mormon, Northern Ireland. So I think it's important to keep it fresh as well by changing your template and photographing new terrain that'll help you reinterpret where you actually live.
Great. So, Dustin, much like myself, you've worked both in TV and movies. In terms of our work in doing locations, what's the difference? And if you can tell us pretty briefly, which do you prefer?
The main difference is the pay. No, that is a big thing, and therefore I like movies better. They pay better. But, yeah, I've actually worked on a lot of TV and a lot of movies. The TV, I started off more in my earlier career. When I came to Atlanta, it was starting off very like more indie movies, smaller budget movies, and a lot of TV, especially network TV. So that was kind of what I was relegated to, finding jobs on those things. Then slowly I progressed and made some decisions and jumped to bigger budget movies, and slowly onto Marvel movies and the big budget stuff. And now I'm working on a TV show right now called Lovecraft Country. So I'm kind of going back and forth. So I've done the network stuff, I've done the movies, I've done the HBOs or the Netflix TV shows. The biggest difference, I think, between all of those is, I'd probably say timing. Especially when you're talking about network shows, the NBCs, the CBSs, all that fun stuff, there's no time to do anything. You start off very late in the process. The scripts, the first script has probably been written. You start off, you scout for that, you have a little time for that. You don't get scripts then until sometimes a week before you have to film that section, that next episode. So we're scouting while we're prepping for a previous episode. We're scouting, then we're wrapping a previous episode. We're scouting, setting up the next location, the next episode. So it's very hectic. It's very stressful in that regards. When you go into like HBO or Netflix, they try to have all the scripts ready, and that helps a lot. There's still a lot of changes, though. There's still a lot of aspects to factor in. So there's still change. It's still not quite as much time as you would hope for. But then on the features, you have a lot more time normally. And granted, things change all the time. While we were working on Endgame and Infinity War, we're constantly rewriting the scripts. So things kept changing. It happens, but you have more time to prep for it. So instead of having to find a location and do the negotiation and finding the parking and all that stuff in a week, you now have, for movies, you have a month sometimes, which is a lot nicer. So yeah, obviously I prefer the film world of it all to the TV world. So.
Great. So Kat, just because we're going to get running out of time soon and want to leave some time for questions, what are some of the truly wonderful things in the work that we do? What are the big rewards for this crazy thing we've signed up for?
It's definitely the people. It's the crews. It's our own crews, our location departments. It's the crews that we work with. And, it's the members of the public that really help us out a lot. And often they are great sources of information. If you're looking for something particular, you can ask them and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's around the corner. Or they just, and getting the community involved is very, very rewarding, I think, because I don't like to move out of the way. We're in town. This is our deal. It's great to get communities involved. It's great to, give back as much as you can, because we do have a huge footprint, and we're a massive impact on any community, large or small. So the fun part for me is working with people and making it happen, and overcoming a lot of big challenges, and just working through it and not giving up, and getting the end product that everybody wants.
Great. We're going to open up the floor. Any questions if anyone has any? I know there's a mic right there. But.
Hi. So do you have any tips and tricks for the productions, like student productions or independent films that don't have any budget whatsoever, especially in the places that were very spoiled with film, like California, for example?
Anyone want to take that?
Just real quick, I know that, especially if you're talking about locations, there are certain cities and things like that that actually have a kind of a student budget almost thing for permits and whatnot, for things like that are a lot less. A lot of times you can do student work for free. You just have to find the right cities or the right places that'll do it. You guys don't have to worry about necessarily all the trucks that we have to worry about and the trailers and all that stuff. You got to bring a couple cameras and your gear and all that stuff. It's a lot less to worry about. So in regards to location world, just make sure to do the right thing. Don't just guerrilla style it necessarily. If you want to do it the right way, go ahead and look into the permitting process, which usually most cities will have something available to you. Look into the permitting process. A lot of times you'll find that it's free to do student filming there. So.
A lot of times, I know of many instances where student filmmakers, excuse me, have gotten great locations at a lot better rate than I could ever get, because they go in with 15 people and one truck, and they're going to go in off hours, things like that. So what I tell young filmmakers is, don't be afraid to approach the Getty Center. Don't be afraid to approach the folks that live in the mansion. Be honest with people. Tell them what you're going to do. Do what you say you're going to do, and don't do what you say you're not going to do. Because frankly, I've followed student filmmakers and small filmmakers into a number of places, and they bone them, and it makes my job a lot harder. So don't be afraid to approach somebody. Tell them, I've got $100 for this location. We want to do these things. And sometimes they just tell you thank you, go away, but a lot of times you'll get what you need. So just be straight with people, be honest with people, and don't mess up the locations for the rest of us up here.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, I want to say, without trying to sound like I'm blowing smoke, that I think you guys are so incredible in terms of what you guys do for economies, yet no one really takes notice of it. So, for example, I visited Croatia not too long ago, and speaking with those tour guides, how it became a billion-dollar economy, so to speak, through tourism, right? But everyone credits the writers and directors, etc., which they should as well. But you guys are amazing for what you all do, so I want to say thanks for that. And you should give them a round of applause, because I think they're just amazing in that regard. That being said, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm representing Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. My friends are here. And what we're interested in finding out, because of the work that we do in the entertainment industry, and we brokered like television shows, etc., coming to our islands, but how do we get into a position of working more with you guys so that we can also transform our islands into areas for location scouting? Well, I mean, besides maybe flying all of you all in and treating you to
I have a
Roman.
feeling Mike's going to want to answer this.
Yeah.
Mike is also the current president of the Location Managers Guild International, so I'll defer to Mr. President.
We just actually, working with Nico Luke and the folks in the film office in Trinidad and Tobago, we just sent 3 or 4 location managers on a FAM tour, a familiarization tour to Trinidad and Tobago. They came back with fantastic stories and fantastic photos, and in our magazine we'll have an article about it, I think, the next issue. You know, I think most of us are where we are unintentionally. I don't think any of us grew up wanting to be filmmakers. I was working in the woods. You know, most of the people I know in the business fell into it. They just happened to be at the right place at the right time. So, but your question is more, how do you...
So is it tax rebates, incentives? What are the things that
that's
attract
number one.
you guys to...
If you have an incentive, you know, filmmakers are whores. We'll go where the money is. And... Oh, sorry, there are kids under 18 here. I'm not supposed to say things like that. But that's why Georgia is the king right now, because they've got the best tax incentive in the world. If the incentive in Georgia goes away, so will filmmaking. I've seen it happen in New Mexico. I've seen it happen in Washington State. I've seen it happen in Michigan, North Carolina. It's all about money. It's all about money. I mean, if you want to break into the business, go where the business is, make yourself indispensable, and if you're a hard worker, you'll get there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay, this is hard being on the microphone. Thank you guys for being here. I'm a career counselor, and I just find learning about different careers incredibly fascinating. So it's very exciting to have some insight to what you guys do. I was curious to know about you, though, individually. You guys have a unique perspective on films because you're part of the process, and I'm sure you see films differently than I do. And so I was curious to know, what was the last film or TV show episode that you saw that wasn't your own, that you thought that background, the scene was incredible, and you were just in awe of it? I'd love to hear about it and hear about what was unique about it. Thanks.
That's a really hard question.
It's a really hard question. It's subjective.
Yeah.
Probably whatever the guy at the end worked on for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that in my worst nightmare sometimes, some of the stuff that you've had to do, but it looks phenomenal, and I'm envious of it. But it's a subjective thing. I mean, it's like, what's your favorite color? It's kind of hard to pick what you like, what you don't like.
That's okay. I want to know if there was something that got you excited about, like, wow, I'm so glad I do this. This person just did it amazingly, and I want to do that too.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. It's not just the location. I mean, you see a beautiful location, but a lot of it, for me, has to do with the light, the way it's lit, the costumes. I mean, you start to analyze everything. And if I see a really good actor or a really good ensemble cast and the makeup is not good, it throws me off. I'm like, they're great, but the makeup is not good. The light is not good. But when you get the combination of everything together, great photography, great production design, wardrobe, acting, editing, and it just comes out to be an all-round great product, that's what gets me excited. It's not just the locations. I mean, obviously that's the base, that's the bones, but it's all the other crafts combined for me. And I've seen a lot of great, a lot of these streaming shows are really good. I mean, I watched this really bizarre streaming show about East Germany, and it was just beautiful. And, it was really like the difference between East and West, the dark, the light. It was just, everything about it was really, really beautiful. So it just depends. For me, it's an all-encompassing thing.
I like the look of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I remember looking at that, thinking all that desert stuff that was shot in Albuquerque, I think it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, that's interesting. I like the dusty roads. I like the rock formations. I liked, if you're going to have a place to see a guy's head on a tortoise, so often I thought, that's a good spot. That's nice. That's cool. or the final showdown they have in that kind of real kind of rocky surround, private canyon where bad stuff's going to go on. I thought there were some really choice locations in that show.
So we've got time for one more question, but we'll be available outside afterwards if anyone else has anything they want to ask.
All right. First of all, thanks for the great talk, and what a great career. I'm jealous. I was curious about the process itself. Once you get a request for a location, what do you do? I mean, do you call Mike, or is it a close-knit community? Do you go to Google Images? Do you go to Reddit? What do you do?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All those things. I used to be, when I worked for the Forest Service, one of my jobs was to appraise property. And the only way an appraiser can do a good job is if they speak with other appraisers to get comparable sales. It's sort of, in some respects, similar to what we do. Sometimes it's obvious. Downtown LA, you go to downtown LA. But what I find is that other location managers can help me out. If I'm stumped for a location and it's in a certain area, I'll figure out who shot there before. I'll call my friends or cold call somebody I don't know. Hey, you shot in such and such a place. I'm looking for this. Do you know of anything like that? And I think sometimes location managers are very, very tight with their information. I'm just the opposite. I'll tell you anything. I'll tell you any location I shot. I'll tell you what my budget was. I'll tell you what my paycheck was. I'll tell you anything, because the only way we get better is if we share information with each other. So for me, it's you use the internet. There's such great photo resources online. Google Earth has changed the way I do my job. My friends and compadres around the world, you can pick up the phone and speak with anybody in the world in 15 seconds. So there's really no way to do it. It's like you use every resource that's out there, and you use the resource that's applicable at the time. At least that's for me.
Great. That answers my question. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
let's take her question.
That's the lady in the gray. Can we do have one more? Quick.
I just wanted to know how does climate, weather, all of that affect your scouting? That's all.
That's all. It does.
It does.
It does, yeah.
It's hard to scout in the rain. It's hard to scout in the rain, and it's hard to take a good shot at 2 in the afternoon. Early morning, later afternoon, great light. I was scouting. I've worked on 2 commercials in my life. One was in eastern Montana, Brooklyn chewing gum, Italian chewing gum, early on in my career. Didn't see the sun for 8 days. I was in Browning, Montana for 8 days waiting for the sun to come out, because you couldn't see 500 yards because of the snow. It affected my scouting. I made a lot of money to sit and watch bad TV in Browning, Montana.
It really ended up affecting when we actually go film there. I mean, the crew doesn't want to be sitting in scorching hot or extreme cold. So it ends up being the part of the logistical challenge is dealing with environment and the change in climate these days.
Yeah.
So I'm getting the sign that we're
Can
out
I
of...
just add 2 seconds onto that? Sometimes with my scouting, you'd be scouting out of season. So I'd be doing my main work in January, February in Northern Ireland, and you'd have snow everywhere and no leaves in the trees. And you'd be having to sell those locations, which would be shot in August, September, often. So you'd have to be kind of thinking in advance what things might end up looking like.
But we're getting the sign that we're out of time. We'll be out in the hallway for the next little while if you have any questions, so please come and see us. And thank you all very much for attending the Location Advantages Building National panel.